And now our second session is the transition of South Asia from bilateral to tri- and multilateral cross-border electricity trade. Now, in order to diversify risks and explore available opportunities, countries need to transition to multilateral trade, achieving seamless trading capabilities within the region. In this session, experts will discuss about the latest trends in electricity trade in the region, experience sharing of power pooling in the Nordic region, tapping the electricity market in India through power exchanges, and a power trader's perspective on cross-border electricity trade in the region. Now, I'd like to invite our keynote speaker, Mr. Pankaj Batra, Director, Integrated Research and Action for Development, on the stage, as well as our moderator, Mr. Michael Satin, Director, Clean Energy USAID, our presenter, our panel. I would like to invite Mr. Wilhelm Soderstrom, the Principal Consultant of Nord Pool Consulting, Mr. Harish Saran, Executive Director, PTC India Limited, Mr. MD Mahbubur Rahman, Chief Engineer, Bangladesh Power Development Board, Mr. S.N. Barde, Chief Executive Officer, GMR Energy, Mr. Rajesh Kumar Meridatta, Director, Indian Energy Exchange, as well as Honorable Mr. Krishna Prasad Oli, Member, National Planning Commission, on the stage. I'd also like to request the participants and delegates to please be seated and settled in. And of course, we are live from the Power Summit 2019 Facebook page right about now. To begin with, we would like to start with a keynote speech, for which I'd like to invite on stage Mr. Pankaj Batra, the Director of Integrated Research and Action for Development, SARI.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the session after lunch, and hope to keep the session interesting so that you are alive. This is one of the key changes which has happened between the policy of the Government of India in 2016 and after that in 2018, going from bilateral agreements to trilateral agreements. And actually, it's not written as multilateral agreements, but multilateral agreements are basically a sum of a number of trilateral agreements, and the issues are not different in that. Of course, power exchange can be counted as a multilateral agreement where a lot of bidders, buyers bid together and a lot of sellers bid together in a closed double-sided auction. So I'll give you a brief of this. I'll set the context for this session, and of course, then Michael will discuss this with the panelists. Just to tell you that this is we are South Asia SARI program. This is a SARI program, South Asia Regional Initiative with Energy Integration, and this has been going on since the year 2000. So it's a long time. And we, IRADE, I'm project director in IRADE for the SARI program. We are partnering SARI since 2012, and this will go on up to 2022. So we hope that we are like catalysts. We meet all the governments of South Asia and make them aware of the provisions which are available for trading for various issues related to cross-border trading on open access and the power exchange, so that they get a flavor of what markets exist in India and how they feel comfortable in taking part in the Indian markets. We hope by the end of 2022, there is active trading going on freely going on between the South Asian nations. These are the countries. There are 8 countries actually. If you see there, The flags at the bottom, the 8 countries, which includes actually Afghanistan and Pakistan, but we are started engaging more in the in the ones which are on the BIMSTEC side, the eastern side, not yet done too much there. And Maldives, of course, is far off, so integrating electricity grid to Maldives will not be feasible, but it'll be more in the form of trading of energy. We'll be talking about, I mean, what we do will be focusing in future on not only trading of electricity, but of energy, which is oil and gas. But electricity predominates. Just to give you about the diversity of supply sources which are available in the 4 countries, that is India, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and Nepal. So you can see that in India, it's predominantly coal, which is 56%. In terms of installed capacity, this is. And in Bangladesh, natural gas constitutes 83%, whereas Bhutan and Nepal are predominantly hydro. So this makes for a very good generation mix in South Asia for cross-border trading. You know, I feel this should have happened much before, because it would result in optimal utilization of the power resources. We've already discussed in the previous sessions about the benefits of having hydro along with the thermal. And of course, you could see here in India, the renewable capacity is also substantial, 22%, mostly solar and wind, which are intermittent in nature. So they'll gel very well with the hydro of Bhutan and Nepal. So it's a very good natural mix for South Asia. That was with respect to supply side, but the demand side also we did a study earlier, where you can see that the 4 countries, that the peak demands during the day, this is a typical day, comes in different time slots. So the dark one are the very high peak demand, very high demands, the peak demands, and the light ones, when you go low, that's the least demand. So you see that they don't always happen at the same time. So because of demand diversity also, you have opportunities for exchange of power. Now, up till now, we were doing bilateral trading of power, and bilateral was going on with Nepal since a long time, with Bangladesh since 2013, and Bhutan, of course, since a long time, since the Chuka Hydro project came into existence in 1986, I think. But I wanted to focus on how do you convert, I mean, the focus of the new guidelines is changing from bilateral to trilateral agreements. So I just wanted to bring this clause, the new clause in the guidelines for export of electricity 2018, issued by the Ministry of Power, Government of India. So if you see, it talks about various methods of trading, which could be through bilateral agreements, through bidding, and through mutual agreements between entities. But it talks about, in case of tripartite agreements, the cross-border trade of electricity across India shall be allowed under the overall framework of bilateral agreements signed between Government of India and Government of respective neighboring country of the participating entity. There were certain apprehensions when it says under the overall framework of bilateral agreements, but there's no, it's not just a lip service, it's just not a show. It's actually, the reason why this is written is because of certain provisions, which I'll come to later, certain things we have to be aware of when we do trilateral agreements. This is another clause of these new guidelines, which says that it will be governed by the rules, regulations, policies framed by Government of India, CEA, Central Electricity Regulatory Commission. So the new policy of Government of India came out in December 2018. The new regulations of CRC for cross-border trade came out in March 2019. And we talked about the CA conduct of business rules, which have more or less in the state of finalization. And what was said was that it will come out in a month. So that once that comes out, there'll be nothing left for preventing trade of power. All rules and regulations will be in place. This is another clause of the tripartite agreement, where it says that it will be signed for transaction across India. For the participating entities would sign transmission agreement with the Central Transmission Utility of India for obtaining transmission corridor access, which in India we call open access. Further, the transmission system in India for transmission of electricity across the territory of India under cross-border trade of electricity shall be built after concurrence of the Government of India and necessary regulatory approvals. So these are, the regulatory approvals are required because of the technical nature of available transfer capability of a transmission system. You just can't keep on loading a line beyond its limits. So that's the reason this has been mentioned. So power could flow from Nepal to Bangladesh through the Indian territory, but only after it satisfies the regulations which are there for open access, connectivity, open access, and some others. So there are some things which are common to both bilateral and trilateral, some requirements which should be there in the form of there would be a generation contract, whether it's bilateral or trilateral. So Bangladesh could sign a generation contract with Nepal. That's one, but there has to be a transmission contract. This would again be there in both, of using the transmission system of another country, which is meant for seeing payment of transmission charges, applying for long-term open access or medium-term open access or short-term, depending on the type of contract. Connectivity, this is an important thing. It's a small thing, but it's got some technical requirements to see that the grid operates safely and securely. We have connectivity regulations of the CRC, the central regulator in India, which everybody has to comply with, even if he is within India. So any generator or a load who seeks open access or wants to get connected to the grid has to comply with that, and any distribution company also. Similarly, any country which gets connected has to comply with those connectivity regulations. This is just to ensure that the grid operates safely and securely. It's got a lot of details in it. I won't talk about it just now. Open access is another thing, but they have to comply with the open access regulations, and grid code. Grid code, as was mentioned, the chairperson CRC had asked us to make a common minimum grid code for South Asia, which we made and circulated to all South Asian countries in the beginning of September. And this is going to be taken up formally by the SAFIR Executive Committee meeting. SAFIR is South Asia Forum of Infrastructure Regulators on 5th of December in Dhaka. So we are also holding stakeholder consultations with all the South Asian countries. We've had it so far with Bhutan. We are going to have with Nepal tomorrow. Dhaka we've had. So these are the Sri Lanka also we would do it, but Sri Lanka it's not connected yet, so it doesn't matter if we have it a little later. But we will put up all these the draft regulations along with comments to the SAFIR Executive Committee meeting, and then we'll go on the process between the regulators. There are some additional requirements of in addition to the bilateral trade, which are there only for trilateral trade. The transmission agreement would be signed in the intervening country. It will be linked to the generation, because there could be some cases where the generation, suppose there is two units of 500 megawatt which are generating, and one of the units trips in the generating country, but the drawing country doesn't get to know about it till later. Then there has to be a mechanism for how to deal with this. Therefore, the trilateral agreement requires provisions for that. There have to be clauses dealing with deviation, settlement, and as well as transmission congestion. There could be deviation settlement in the first case. If a generator trips, the drawing country will keep on drawing because it will not know about it. So how to deal with that? And also, in case there's a transmission congestion which happens in the intervening country due to tripping of a line or otherwise, how to deal with that? Because the generation in the exporting country would have to be reduced to see that the line doesn't get overloaded. So the fair principles have to be adopted of commensurate reduction of generation for anybody who's using that line. Payment of transmission charges to the intervening country and accounting of transmission losses in the intervening country, but there would also be some clauses which would be linked to contingent liabilities, because if the buying country and the selling country breaks a contract, a transmission system which has already been constructed in the intervening country, what would happen to that? It will become stranded to some extent. So there will be some liabilities which would arise as a result of that. That's why these are special features of trilateral vis-a-vis bilateral contracts. Sorry. Yeah, this is multilateral, which is, as I said, multilateral trade is nothing but a combination of trilateral trades. If Nepal wants to sell power to both Bangladesh and India, or Bangladesh and another country, then part of that generation would be meant, a certain capacity would be meant for a particular country and a certain capacity for another country. But there will be, in effect, be two trilateral contracts with intervening transmission facilities. So it can be dealt in the same way. We have such sort of shared projects in India also, and the same thing could happen here. So they could be considered as multilateral contracts, but nothing special about it, because it would be the capacities that allocated to two countries could be treated as two different plants. But there are some rules which could be made for that. There would be appropriate reduction of generation among the two buyers. And it also depends on the contract, whether it's one which will always supply and the other one which can afford to be interrupted. It depends on the commercial contract. And of course, trading through power exchange, as I said, there are multiple buyers and multiple sellers, so it could be considered a multilateral trade. I'm just showing you the heart of the matching mechanism which happens in a power exchange. Already, Mr. Mehndiratta is their director strategy in Indian Energy Exchange in the panel, and he'll talk more in details. But this just gives you a flavor of what happens in a power exchange, where there are the buy bids and supply bids get aggregated like this, and there's a common minimum, market clearing volume and market clearing price at which it gets cleared. This is the day-ahead market, which is predominant which is what is mostly used. So in this case, the market clearing price was 2 rupees 50 paisa, and the market clearing volume was 120 megawatt. I'm not going to discuss more than this, because there's there may be three, you can see A, B, C, there are 3 sellers and 3 buyers. Bilateral and trilateral contracts, so this will be valid for both. It would be good to have interaction at all levels. So what we propose is there should be a forum of regulators, South Asia Forum of Regulators, South Asia Forum of Transmission Utilities, South Asia Forum of System Operators, and South Asia Forum of Account Settlement Agencies. Now in India, the Account Settlement Agency is the Regional Power Committee, which does it for the region between states. So we'd have to have one in which do it across countries. Open access is just, I thought I'll give you since it is going to be used quite a lot, this is the definition which is given in the Electricity Act. It means non-discriminatory provision of use of transmission or distribution system or associated facilities with such lines or system by any licensee or consumer or a person engaged in generation in accordance with the regulations specified by the appropriate commission. So there is an open access regulations which is there in India, which is transparent and is fair to everybody. The basic thing about trilateral contracts is to see that there is commensurate distribution of risks and rewards. And once that is done, I think it will be fair to all nations. And that's why the forums which we've said would ensure that this fairness happens. This is just an example of multilateral trade which happens in Southeast Asia, so which is Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, where it's in a state of implementation. So some of it is happening, and some of it is going to happen in the future. So you see, power can flow from Laos straight to Singapore, depending on contracts which are signed. We hope that by the end of maybe next year or so, we will have electricity flowing freely within South Asia for mutual benefit of all South Asian countries. And I think all this can be done with cooperation. Thank you.
Hello, mic check. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the keynote speech, Mr. Pankaj Batra. And now I'd like to hand it over to the moderator, Mr. Michael Satin, Director of Clean Energy, USAID.
Good afternoon. I know this is the toughest session of any day of a conference or meeting because we're now approaching 2:30, the sleeping hour. No sleeping. Because promise, this is the best session of the entire week. Okay? All right. We're really excited to have you all here. Thank you for making it a point to be a part of our afternoon. And thank you to our honored guests on the dais for agreeing to come and speak with us today. I think you're going to hear a very frank discussion of elements, and I like to say that the organizers of this event did an exceptionally good job, because it seems that this particular subject matter follows right on the heels of what was very much an invigorating inaugural session this morning. Does everybody remember that session? Yeah, I mean, we had a lot of high-powered folks on the stage, and a lot of them spoke incredibly encouraging with a lot of political will, or demonstration of political will, that the region is perched to integrate their power grids, put together collective trading agreements, and that we're going to have all these problems solved in the next month or so. Okay, in the next 2 months. But we all know that really there's a lot of work to be done still from here to there. The concept of power trade, and certainly an integrated grid, is still a little ways off. But I like to say that we are working hard on it every day, and we feel there's been a lot of accomplishments and success already, not the least by every government in the region and the high-powered technical experts that we have assembled on stage, and that we are seeing a bright future, and this is going to, of course, power the Asian century, which is very exciting to be a part of. My name is Michael Satin. I am the Director of the Office of Clean Energy and Environment at USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development, at the American Embassy in New Delhi, India. And I'm very honored to be a part of this gathering, and very excited to lead this particular discussion. Let me quickly just introduce the folks we have on the stage, and they're not in the order that I necessarily are going to call them out, but we have Mr. Wilhelm Soderstrom, and he's a principal consultant at Nordpool Consulting, based in Oslo, Norway. I think you're going to get a good sampling of what happens in a well-established and high-performing power pool situation in the Nordic states in Scandinavia. We have Mr. Harish Saran, who's the Executive Director of the Power Trading Corporation in India Limited, and I think you're going to hear a lot about what PTC has done to really move the paradigm of energy trade forward. I like to say that we've been a part of that discussion and involved, and we're very proud of the work we do together. Mr. Mahbubur Rahman, who is the Chief Engineer at the Bangladesh Power Development Board, a place near and dear to my heart. Before I served in India, I was in Dhaka for a couple years, so I consider that home. We're glad to have you, sir. Mr. Rajesh Kumar Midurata, who's the director of the Indian Energy Exchange, and we're going to hear from him about the potential growth of energy markets in South Asia. Dr. Krishan Prasad Oli, sorry for butchering your name, he's a member of the Nepalese Planning Commission, and we're going to hear from Dr. Krishan Prasad Oli as well. A private sector representative, S.N. Barde. Mr. Barde, thanks for making it out. We're glad to have you. And of course, our good friend, from, but there's never a moment when he doesn't add value to the conversation. We're very proud of the fact that our South Asia Regional Initiative for Energy Integration, or as you may know it, SARI, the USAID program that has been working on regional energy integration and trade for the last nearly 20 years now, is headed by our Chief of Party, Mr. Pankaj Batra, Project Director. And so we're going to hear from all these folks today. Bear with me while I go through a couple important pieces of information just to set the stage. I promise I won't talk too much longer. I'll try to keep it down to 2.5 more hours. You all know that about 3,500 megawatts of power are currently being traded in the BBIN region, or the eastern part of South Asia. But all of that is through bilateral trade. There's not a lick of it, not 1 kilowatt, not even a single day trade goes through more than a single bilateral trade regime. And that's something we want to talk about today. How do we move from that to the next generation of integrated trade in the region? Countries in the region have already benefited from cross-power trade, as you know. Nepal has managed its demand and almost reduced its load shedding with power imports. I mean, that's pretty impressive if you really think about it. Not so long ago, 15 years ago, load shedding in Nepal was chronic, was endemic, and there was really no vision to a future without it. Today, what we're seeing in Nepal is a very good sort of regime that manages, and as you saw this morning, they're getting ready to put online some untold numbers of gigawatts of hydro power in the region that's going to be available to sell, and I think that's incredibly admirable. The export of power from India to Bangladesh has helped in reducing load shedding from 1,048 megawatts in 2012 to about 307 megawatts in 2015. That's an incredible reduction, and that is very indicative of the advancements that are happening here all over South Asia. You all know the sort of old story about South Asia being the least connected region in the world, but the potential for power trade here remains incredibly high. And that's what we want to take advantage of. It's the piece we want to build on. All the work that's been done up to date has been great, but we need to take the ball over the goal line. We need to finish the job, and we need to make sure that the region is fully integrated, that there is a good working apparatus for a regionally integrated grid, and that energy is being traded from haves to have-nots and back again, depending on seasonality, geography, and natural resource endowment. There are many regions in the world. We're going to talk about a little bit of them today. As I mentioned, we have somebody from the Nord Power Pool in Oslo, Norway, who's going to talk to us about some of the examples of things that are going on in Europe. But there are many regions in the world, including Europe, the US, Gulf countries, and even in ASEAN, where the trilateral and multilateral power trading has brought immense benefits to population and to industry in participating countries. For example, the benefits of full market integration in Europe has estimated about 30 billion euro per year in the gas markets, and a cost savings or a benefit of about 40 billion or more euros in electricity markets. That's phenomenal numbers that should incentivize any of us to think very clearly about how we can improve the bilateral or the trilateral and multilateral trade. Each country in the region is different, and while some people may see that as a challenge, I have to say that the vast majority of us see that as an incredible endowment. There is a diversity of energy sources, as we all know, from hydro and a growing renewable energy market in solar and wind that's now in Bangladesh starting to take off. Not to mention, of course, the hydro that's happening here in Nepal and a variety of other elements that are possible to capitalize on and make for a pretty bright future, if only we can get our heads around how to do that. I got a bunch more bullet points on here, but I think I'm going to trash those if you guys don't mind. If you really want, let me know, I'll send them to you. Only because I think we have a bunch of gifted folks on stage that you want to hear from, and I think they have a lot more to say. And I think I've said everything I want to say. Let me just finalize this by saying this. The United States government continues to be very, very committed to supporting our friends and colleagues here in South Asia and all the countries of the region as they're looking to achieve their own energy security. And we believe that free markets and regulatory policy frameworks that inform those markets, protect consumers, and look out for things like environmental and social justice is a good way forward to integrate the market here, to eventually develop an integrated regional grid, and to make sure that energy is available to all those who need it and demand it so that they can improve their own livelihoods, they can protect their families, grow their communities, and be productive economic agents in the way all of us hope to be, to create a prosperous and secure future. That is the official word from the United States government. So I am firmly committed to that, and I know that the leaders here in Southeast Asia are, and I hope you will join us in that sentiment as we go through this afternoon's session. Before we go to, I'm going to start off with before we go to some questions and answers, I am going to ask our very kind and gracious MC Malvika. Is this the right moment, Malvika, or am I a little bit early? Early, okay, good. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn now to our panel on the dais, and we're going to ask each of them some leading questions. And then after we given them each a chance to kind of answer, then we're going to go to general questions from the audience. Does that sound good? Is there anybody who doesn't like that? If you don't like it, let me know, because then you have to leave. Anybody? Good. So everybody's staying. I'm glad to hear that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start over here with Mr. Soderstrom, again, the principal consultant from the Nord Pool Consulting, and talk with him a little bit about, in Europe in general, and of course in the Nordic countries, there's been a lot of success about integrated power systems. And most of the power traded in the region is now through the Nordic power pool. So congratulations to you guys on that. Good coup d'etat. I'm digging it. Here's the deal, though. What we want to know here in South Asia, and myself as a South Asian, I want to know what lessons can this region learn from the power pools such as yours, markets from across the world, in your experiences. I know you're currently doing some work in Southeast Asia with ASEAN, and you can bring that into your response, so don't be shy. But what are some of the minimum requirements as policymakers, regulators, infrastructure developers, and politicians, not to mention the private sector, are thinking through next steps? How do we get there? What are some of the minimum requirements for establishing a vibrant power market, in your opinion? And what institutions and frameworks are essential or will facilitate the transition to trilateral and multilateral power trade in South Asia region? Finally, some of the factors that should be considered while arriving at the wheel charging in the case of electricity when it's being transmitted through a transit country, as we're seeing, of course, here in South Asia with India playing that role. How is it being done in the Nordic region? That's a lot, but let me pass it off to you and see if you can take a good. I like to clap for the people before they talk, just so they feel love. Feel love, come on, give love, love, love.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good job, go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. Firstly, thank you a lot. I'm honored to be part of this and to be able to share some of our experiences, both from the Nordic, but I thought also I could take some experience from the Southern African Power Pool and also some of the latest developments in the ASEAN region. But firstly, I thought maybe a short history on Nord Pool and what led up to the market we see today in Europe, and then we can take some of the minimum requirements that we see as important going forward. So firstly, actually there are some similarities with Norway and Nepal. Of course, the mountains, first of all, and a lot of hydropower. And Norway, the precondition for market establishment in Norway was actually oversupply, over-investment in generation. And the market as such was quite, let's say, inefficient, uneconomical, driven. So it was decided to initiate a market reform, a deregulation process to split up generation and transmission, etc. And then by using this market to make the, let's say, the production and transmission of the power more efficient. This was done, and also looking at Norway as a mountainous or hydropower heavy country like Nepal, Norway has its dry periods, and also I think it's every 6th year you could also see a dry year for the full year, which is of course very challenging for a small country. So then it was decided that Sweden could be a good company, let's say a partner in this, so you can utilize some of the Swedish thermal and nuclear power to kind of compensate for dry situations. So this was done, Sweden joined, and we established the first international power market. And by doing this, you could utilize different resources in the region. And by doing this, you need to start looking into the short-term perspective. So going from long-term bilaterals or medium-term bilaterals into actually fairly short-term, day-ahead perspective of the trading. So at Nord Pool then, which is the market operator, we established something called the day-ahead auction, which has been mentioned previously. And this auction is then given both transmission capacity from the TSOs, but also then orders from the supply and demand side. So all of these three parties, they will then meet in this auction, and out of this comes marginal pricing of power for each hour of the day, the following day, let's say. And then going further, more and more countries joined, and finally, actually, EU decided that this model that we had in the Nordics is actually the model for the whole of Europe. So right now, a process is ongoing to integrate the full kind of European region into this model. So, of course, this brings efficiency, it brings the right type of utilization of your transmission infrastructure, marginal pricing in the region. But this is also quite a far step. Here you integrate all your resources into a regional market. And perhaps that is not the first step for Nepal and India and Bangladesh and Bhutan. Maybe you want to start with just surplus and excess trading. And this is where the Southern African Power Pool comes into the picture, where you utilize the same short-term perspective as we have in the Nordics, but you utilize it only for excess and emergency volumes, and you trade that in an organized manner together with bilateral contracts. And out of this you get a fairly flexible and dynamic market structure. We also talked about the ASEAN. The ASEAN is moving forward towards multilateral trading, and we just finalized a study together with the International Energy Agency in September, I think it was presented, to finalize or to find at least the minimum requirements to initiate multilateral trading. And of course, you would have some certain topics. You would have political, you would have technical, and also potentially institutional requirements they have to meet or at least reach to some extent. And on the political level, of course, political will, you need some kind of international or intergovernmental agreements or inter-utility agreements, as we see in the Southern African region. You would need the technical ones, harmonized grid codes around interconnector operation. You would need to come up with a wheeling methodology to compensate the neighboring countries that are providing wheeling services to wheel or transfer the power. And you would also need to create third-party access, so you actually can utilize your neighbor's grid without any issues. Another big issue in the ASEAN region, which could be also be a problem here, is actually data and information sharing. A lot of the data information is confidential and might be a big threshold for integrating the power systems. Yes, so I will not go too much more into the details, but of course, looking forward, creating some kind of regional institution could be very important to both coordinate and further maybe create a market operator based on that structure. Okay, thank you.
Wilhelm, thank you very much. Come on, better than that. Give it up. Let's go. All right. Listen, did everybody see Malvika just come up on stage and stand right here and talk to me? Everybody see that? She just walked up here just a second ago. Okay, she handed me a piece of paper, and I want to share it with you because I don't like secrets. We are behind time, so please ask the panel. You didn't put the bottom on the L. Panel to keep it brief. We need to finish by 3. So we're done.
Sorry about that, otherwise I won't get paid.
Okay. We want her to get paid. So here's the deal. I'm going to beg and plead with all of our esteemed colleagues. I know you came from far to be a part of this, and your presence here is greatly appreciated. And I should have said something before you got started, Wilhelm, so you got the frosting on the cake today. But I'm going to ask everybody to keep their comments down to about 3 minutes so that we can get through here in time and not get Malvika fired. Thank you very much for those insights. I think one of his closing comments there that I found very interesting, and I think Pankaj spoke to this in his presentation, was about the importance of regional bodies that sort of look at regulation, that sort of make sure that there's free and open trade, there's information, free and open trade, information to facilitate stable markets and finding equilibrium places. And I think all those are really good. And you've noticed in Pankaj's presentation that our SARI program, not to pat ourselves on the back, but has been really good about helping to establish some of those regional bodies that are looking at just those things. So thanks for mentioning us, Wilhelm. Okay, I'd like to turn it over to Harish Saran, who's the Executive Director at PTC India Limited. Mr. Saran, if you could speak to us a little bit, you know the Government of India's guidelines and regulations that we started off by talking about today include several provisions, including trilateral, multilateral trade, and PTC is one of the leading private traders active in cross-border power trade in the region. So, in your opinion, if you might share with us, what are the 3 main challenges in moving the region towards the multilateral, trilateral trade goal? Wow, that's a big question. Please, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. Before answering the question, let me tell you one thing. I attended the first power summit in the year 2013. And during that summit, we were discussing about harnessing the hydro potential of Nepal and selling it to India. Now, we have come to a stage where we have started discussing selling power to other countries. So it is a great, I can say that this is a great change in the last 5-6 years. And if the things are going in the way as they are going now, in the another 4 years, we may be discussing about selling power from the South Asian region to Southeast Asian region. This is all going to become a reality.
Little applause,
it is only
please.
a matter of time.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Now let me come to the question. This CBET basically, when CBT was not there, even at that time, transactions were taking place between all the neighboring countries, between Bangladesh and India, Bangladesh, India and Bhutan, India and Nepal. They were all under bilateral modes. So the agencies involved in the transactions, they formulated terms and conditions, guidelines, considering all the factors considering all the factors, and all such transactions are going on very well. We have not faced any dispute so far in any of the bilateral transactions. And as a PTC, it gives me immense pleasure and it gives me a sense of pride also that we started all the 3 transactions, and with the support of the other parties, we formulated terms. And even in India, this trading was started in the year 2002, but at that time CRC rules and regulations for trading was not there. CRC came out with regulations only in the year 2004. So even at the time of framing guidelines, CRC took cognizance of the terms and conditions that were prevailing at that point of time. So what I want to say here, that let us start doing all the transactions. Rules and regulations will be formed, and here traders are going to play a very important role in case of multilateral transactions, because generator is always interested in generating and getting his payment on time, whereas buyer is always interested in getting power because they have signed some agreement with the hope that they would be getting power when they need it. So the trader is going to play a major role in the multilateral transactions. Now here, what happens actually, people think that trader is basically an entity who is always interested in their trading margin. It is not so. Trader is also playing a role of facilitator. Now in case of multilateral contracts, the transaction in most likely, in all probability, the transaction would take place like a generator in Nepal would be signing an agreement with the trader in India, and the trader in India, or can be further signing an agreement with the buyer located in Bangladesh or any utility in Bangladesh. So all the groundwork which are required as per CBET, like getting all the clearances in India for wheeling the power, as well as other governmental interventions whichever are required for such type of transactions, that becomes the responsibility of the trader. That activities are required to be done by the trader which is involved in the entire process. So that way trader is going to play a major role. Even if you ask me very frankly, I can say that all the transactions which we are doing, they are basically trilateral in nature. What happens? We sign an agreement with the generator. That agreement is, that becomes a separate agreement between generator and the trader. And similarly, an agreement is signed between a buyer and the trader. So three parties are already involved. If you take the case of Bangladesh, Bangladesh is making payment to PTC in dollar terms. It is not in INR or in Bangladesh currency. It is being made in US dollar only. So that trilateral contract is already there. Multilateral contract is already there. Now in case of multilateral transaction crossing one country, the biggest challenge will be to get the open access in the country which will be used as a transit point. So for that, we are also waiting for the terms and conditions and what guidelines are going to be formed by the CTU. But as a trader, I can say that I don't find major challenge in doing any trilateral contract. Like the present case which we are hearing, where GMR is involved, NVVN is involved, NEA is involved, and BPDB is involved. I am confident these all four parties are capable of concluding this agreement. The moment it is concluded, this will pave way for others to do such type of transactions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saran. Okay, a little bit better than that. A little bit better. Clap. Okay, good. Thank you. I mean, so the India example is one that there are a lot of things already in place, and a lot of work has already been done and started to be realized there. And some of it is just going to require the sort of engagement on both sides of the border. I think, as somebody poignantly said this morning in one of the opening dialogues, that it takes coordinated effort on both sides, or all three sides of the border, three sides being symbolic of the fact there are many players in this. So while one country, perhaps India, has been looking at this for a while, and they've been sort of a transaction partner, the simple fact is that it's going to take all countries to begin to quickly adopt these kinds of regulatory frameworks, and certainly the regimes that, the bodies that are allowed to make decisions, cost-saving decisions, I should say. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Let's now turn to Mr. Mahbubur Rahman. He's the chief engineer at the Bangladesh Power Development Board. And Mr. Rahman, if you don't mind, I would like to kind of throw a question at you. I'm going to try to be very politically sensitive here. But there's been impressive GDP growth in Bangladesh. We all know that. And congratulations to the government there in the country. It's now touching on 8% per annum, from what I understand. I think I read that last night. But since power is a key driver, the government of Bangladesh has taken a number of steps to ensure its power supply, including through cross-border power trade, which is what we're talking about, but predominantly it's been bilateral. So the trilateral and multilateral power trade is that we've been discussing sometimes, especially between Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan. In your view, what overall approach and strategy should be adopted by policymakers in the region to facilitate these transactions? You've had enough experience now to tell us what's worked and perhaps what hasn't worked. If you could share that with us, that would be very interesting. Thank you.
You all know that we have a power system master plan wherein demand and supply is projected up to year 2041. And as per that private power system master plan, 15% is targeted to import from the neighboring countries. So at present, we are now importing 1,160 megawatt from India through bilateral arrangements. And government of Bangladesh now giving more emphasis to strengthen and build more powerful transmission link between India and Bangladesh to not only import, if required, we can go for export also, for import and export of power. So At present, we are now importing power from India through two transmission link, and another 400 kV transmission link is under construction, and hopefully by February 2020, it will be completed. Apart from this, Bangladesh government and Indian government, they are studying the possibility for synchronous grid interconnection, and already super highway link of 765 kV, the possibility of this link is under study. Joint technical team between India and Bangladesh, they are working and ascertaining the viability of the projects. So we hope it will happen one day. And through this super link, we can import power from Bhutan through Assam, India, and also from Nepal through Bihar, India. And also, we have proposed to Indian, our counterpart, for another 4 synchronous grid interconnection at 4 locations, especially in the northern part of the Bangladesh. So in future, to import and export the power with India and other neighboring countries, we are progressing as per requirement of the time. Our electricity coverage is now 95%, and it is targeted to achieve 100% by the year 2021. So we have already ensured for our people the reliability and also availability of the power. Still we are working on the quality power, but now it's time to look for affordability of the electricity. And on the questions of the affordability, from our experience through bilateral arrangement with India, we have seen that cross-border power trading is very, very viable in terms of the affordability of the electricity price. So, if we can make consensus and if we can develop jointly the scale efficient large hydropower projects in Nepal and Bhutan, and then in this way we can expect to get the cheaper electricity within the affordable price of the people of this region. Building on the experience on the bilateral trading, a paradigm shift is required from bilateral to tri or multilateral trading of the electricity. And with the Nepal government, we are progressing very well. In the morning you have heard that we have already signed an MOU for power sector cooperation between Nepal and Bangladesh last year. And in continuation of the MOU, already joint working group and joint steering committee have been formed, and already 2 meetings so far made, and joint technical team generation site and transmission sites of Nepal and Bangladesh, they are working to ascertain the probable hydropower projects and the probable transmission routes between Nepal and Bangladesh through India. And from the Nepalese side, they have submitted a list for 20 hydropower projects, and through discussion and verifying so many data and other issues, already we have narrowed down to 5 projects. Probably Dudkoshi, Lower Orun, and Tamor storage, Shunkushi 2, Shunkushi 3. All these 5 projects, it is in the eastern part of the Nepal and very closer to Bangladesh. So these are the potential hydro projects. Now we are looking and verifying the viability to narrow down the options. Apart from Nepal, we have also in discussion with the Bhutan government also. You have heard the name, the Rotpasong, that is Kuri 1 projects. It's a 1,125 megawatt. So through the BBIN forum, the suggestion came to develop these projects through trilateral involvement, this India, Bangladesh, and Bhutan. We are also working on those proposals. So, from the Bangladesh context, we are now progressing what will require to have a sub-regional trading of power in this region. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Yeah, give it up. Let's hear it. Good job. I like that. I didn't have to say a word. Good. Thank you very, very much. It's obvious that Bangladesh has done a lot of work. There's been a lot of thinking, and you have a number of good, successful projects already on train, and there are things in the future. I think, in later discussions when we get an opportunity, I think there are other curiosities about Bangladesh.
Just apologize me, I forget to mention the most vital projects in Nepal. In the morning also our Honorable Minister already mentioned, we are going to import power from Nepal, 900 megawatt upper Karnali hydropower project to be developed by GMR Group India, and the tariff and the terms and conditions of the power purchase agreement already finalized. It is in the process of the government approval. So hopefully within a couple of months, we'll be able to sign the contract. And from this 900 megawatt, 100% export-oriented hydropower project, we are going to import 500 megawatt power through India. And from this power plant, the power will be injected to Indian grid at Bareilly, a grid substation in the Uttar Pradesh, and then we like to draw this power from our West Bengal border side. So this will be the first instance, the trilateral trading of electricity in this sub-region.
Great, thank you, Mr. Rahman. Thank you. So we've got about 3 minutes left before it's 3 o'clock, and we have 4 speakers left. How do we plan to do this? Everybody gets 25 seconds? Is everybody good with that? My fear is that the rain of Malvika will come down on us all if we're not paying attention. We are going to go a couple minutes over, so forgive us. But there are some other important people on the dais that we want to hear from. But once again, I will beg you to try and keep it to 3 minutes. That's 3 spins of the second hand around the clock. So let's move on, if we may, to Mr. Rajiv Kumar Merdurata, who's the Director of Indian Energy Exchange. And Mr. Merdurata, if I may, the CBET guidelines issued by the government of India in December of 2018, of course, allow for trade in power, in the power exchange, and this potentially means a very enhanced role for power markets in India and the region, such as the IX. So in your view, if you might share with us in 3 minutes, what preparatory work should be done by each of the South Asian countries so that they may equally and fruitfully participate in the power exchange? You may know that through our SARI program, we've been working diligently to establish and put teeth into SARPEX, the South Asia Regional Power Exchange. We've come a long way with that, thanks to Pankaj and his team. We're getting closer every day. And it's now important for all the South Asian countries to truly understand what their role is going to be in that and other opportunities for power market exchange. So if you can tell us a little bit about the preparatory work that goes into that for each of the countries. If you had a chance to sit down and talk with each of the regulators in each of the power exchanges, each of the countries, what would you tell them? Your 2 or 3 points of advice. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Given the short time we have, I'll just dwell upon that what people do, why people do trade on the exchange. Like in last 11 years, we've seen we have grown at 33% CAGR. The reason was that people saw a big value in terms of trading through exchange. We started trading through long term maybe 20 years back. We started doing medium and short term. Then we started on hourly basis since 2012 on the exchange, of course not on the cross border. And now we are doing trade for 15 minutes. So what it gives the value to the people who are actually trading on the exchange in India is that they have, one is that we set a price benchmark. So people know that what is the price in the system, and then there is a marginal price, and then people do take decision based on that marginal price. Second part is they have flexibility. So if you see any medium term, long term contract, there is a bit of rigidity in the contract. You can't change your position overnight. For anything, you have to have pay for something. But in case when you go through exchange, you take advantage of flexibility. You can do trade on day-ahead basis. You can do for any 15-minute time block. And other advantage definitely is the transparency, neutrality, and the payment security. So these are few things which anyway any seller will like to have. So if you see today what our cross-border nations are undergoing through is that they can make use of these values, what is being provided by the exchange. So in terms of flexibility, they can come anytime. And anybody who is operating the system, he knows that today you plan your transmission lines based on a flow which is unidirectional. You see that there is a shortage in this side, surplus this side, and then you take decision based on that. But when you really operate the system, system is not unidirectional. System is bidirectional. So even if you see, talk to people from Bangladesh, they have seen in last winter they were surplus in power. They were ready to trade, sell it, but they were not allowed to do that. Nepal also, in the morning we heard that they can also sell during night time, they can sell during their wet season, but they are not able to do it because they are bound by these contracts and they have to back down only on their side. So these issues are now the issues which are actually putting some kind of binding. Like we know that in Bangladesh they have done contracts for liquid fuel, and then in next maybe 5 years to 10 years, you will see with lot of renewables, prices are going to go down. And then if you are stuck with some contract which is long term in nature, then you feel that there is a penalty you pay for being stuck in the long term contract. So all those things are avoidable. And we have seen in our system itself that in the first 3-4 years of operation of the exchange, people were doing trade on the residual basis. If they have some surplus, they will sell it. If they have shortage, they will buy it. But last 3-4 years, most of the state discoms have raised their level, not doing for the purpose of residual transaction, but they are doing transaction for the economic reasons. So almost today, all distribution companies do trade, though they have surpluses, but they trade on the exchange because they see there is a economic value. If there's, because we are discovering a price at a national level, and when this price is available to all the people, they take a decision based on this price, whether they have to run the plant which is under long term or a short term or a medium term contract, comparing the price of the contract with the exchange price. So this is the value we see can be taken by our cross-border friends. And good part is that whatever process is required to create a good platform, because we are a country with 29 states, lot of maybe 500 generators, 4,000 plus industrial consumers. So whatever happens in our country, the regulations are made, very robust regulations are made to take care of the concerns of each and every participant. And also we have created a critical mass. If you start a new market, like what Mr. Willem shared, that in South African power pool, they are creating a power pool. They have created a power pool for 9 nations, but still that critical mass is not there. In our region, advantage is that we have created a critical mass of maybe 6,000 plus megawatt trade happening around the clock. This advantage can be taken by the participants.
Thank you very, very much. Let's give him a round of applause. That is certainly deserving, sticking with us all the way to the end. Thank you, Mr. Meridata. Listen, we are at the magic hour, so please bear with us while we get through a couple of the other guests, because I think what they have to add to this conversation is extremely important. Next on our list is a member from the Nepal Planning Commission. I think what you'll find Dr. Krishan Prasad Oli has to share with us is very important and influential type of stuff. So from the trilateral, multilateral power trade kind of the higher scale needs coordinated planning and implementation. What are the steps you are taking here in Nepal? We had a lot of people this morning talking about the Nepal context. There was a lot of discussion around the projects that are in place right now. I think there was like 50 trillion megawatts of power being developed in the country. And so you're going to have to look at that in the near future and decide what are the avenues for trading that power out to end users. The questions are, what are the steps being taken here that can ensure coordinated planning on generation and on transmission to your potential customers? Please.
Thank you, Michael. Basically, what we are doing here is, improving the legal instrument, policy measures, and processes and approaches. And recently, we have actually constituted the commission also, for regulatory development of regulatory mechanisms, and that will go across all the sectors. So this is one thing, but specifically for multilateral and trilateral and bilateral things, again, what we think is, individual countries' legal mechanisms need to be in place also. So similarly, agreements between the two countries, of course, we are in infancy in this transboundary trade, energy trade systems. So we have just initiated with India and Bangladesh. So what I can see, the first and important point is, individual countries' legal mechanism. Where are the gaps? How we can improve there? That is the first step. And after that, we also have to review the other countries' legal mechanisms, how they are actually working or implementing their plans and programs. So on the basis of that, the agreement between the two countries can be done. One point I would like to add here is actually transboundary trade or multilateral trade is very, very important in South Asia, the South Asia region, because energy is the engine of growth, and South Asia is projected as the economic engine in the coming century. So for that reason also, I think power. And there again, we have to consider the impact of climate change. And so far, we have heavily dominated by fossil fuel generated energy. And our energy, which is clean energy, of course, all the countries are trying towards the clean energy mechanism. There was an estimate which was done actually in Bhutan, about 40 million metric ton of carbon is actually reduced. So that way, if the clean energy mechanism flows through within the artery of the regional energy mechanism, then actually we are also protecting the mountain, protecting the Himalayas. So that is where this is one of the most important area. Because one of the recent study which was carried out by ICIMOD, which is based in Kathmandu, they say that if 1.5 degrees Celsius is continuous, is to meet, 30% of the Himalaya in the Hindu Kush region will be gone. So that means we will have a greater problem. So therefore, the artery of transboundary, trinational or multinational within the region is very, very important. We have to give due attention to the country-specific legal arrangement, where do we need to intervene and how to improve this, and then sit with the multilateral institution. And I also think that there is a need for this regional trading institution, which will be in future regional trading institution, which will look after one country to another country and how we are doing, how we are cooperating. These are the things. I think my time is over. Thank you.
2 minutes, 58 seconds. All right. Fantastic. Thank you. Applause. Yes. Dr. Prasad Oli, thank you very much for your comments. And I'm glad that somebody finally touched on the all-important issue. In addition to good, robust economic growth, in addition to livelihoods, in addition to making sure that there's energy security, a lot of our energy transition, of course, is about protecting our environment and trying to figure out ways to make sure that future generations can live a prosperous, healthy life. We all know that this region of the world right now is experiencing, especially at this time of the year, some of the really the horrible consequences of energy production and transmission. And that, unfortunately, is something the rest of the world's talking about. And nobody's going to make those changes and solve those problems except for South Asians. And so I'm glad that you are all a part of this discussion, and thank you for those comments and bringing us back to that reality point. It's incredibly important. Finally, we're in our last distinguished speaker, and I want to make sure that we thank everybody, but I especially want to make sure that S.N. Barde is recognized. He comes from the GMR Group. He is the CEO of GMR Group, and he's here to talk with us today on a couple of things that his company is doing. Your company has been in discussions with the government of Bangladesh for exporting power from Nepal to Bangladesh. In your opinion, what has been the key barriers in making this a reality? And if I can just seed that with a couple other questions. So we're actually talking here about barriers to entry into the marketplace. How can these challenges be addressed? What measures can be taken to support trilateral and multilateral projects, such as your own? And how do you see this overall picture unfolding in the next couple of years? You have 7 seconds. Go.
Thank you, Michael. Before I answer your question, let me make this point. Whatever was discussed right from the inaugural session, bilateral, trilateral, multilateral, I think GMR Upper Karnali is in true sense a trilateral which is already in place. We are already there. We are there with a trilateral agreement. A developer from India developing a 900 megawatt project in Nepal, transmitting the power through India, and the ultimate user is in Bangladesh. So this is something which is what we have been speaking of from the morning, and we are proud to be the first ones, pioneers sort of, in this direction. So that is one point which I wanted to make. The other point which is that we won this concession for developing this project somewhere in 2009 in an international competitive bidding. From 9 to 19, it has taken us almost 10 years to come to this stage where we are looking at signing an agreement for this. Now, that perhaps would answer, I would be able to give some of the answers to your question, what you're saying, what are the hurdles, what need to be done. I think all the speakers have spoken enough on what needs to be done. And since this was the first trilateral which we were attending, these were the things which were basically the hurdles, and I'm glad to inform everyone that though we suffered these things since it was a first project, like cross-border regulations itself in India were a big hurdle, without which we could not have gone ahead and signed or even initiated our discussion with Bangladesh for sale of power. To admit frankly, in 2009, this project was bid out as an export-oriented project, and everyone, including Nepal, had only India as a destination country for export. Some power to be used within Nepal, and the balance to go to India. It is about 4 years back that we got this idea about a trilateral thing, and we started working on it. So it's almost 4 years out of this 10 years that we have been working on this trilateral agreement. This occurred to us and we worked on it, though the leadership in all the three countries gave an enormous blessing to this. I mean, right from the prime ministers of each of these countries gave a blessing to such kind of project. And it is because of this blessing that all the hurdles in terms of regulations, in terms of other issues regarding transmission, etc., could be resolved satisfactorily. I will not go into each one of the issues what we faced, but I hope that these issues what we face now that some kind of framework has been put in place, going forward as we implement this, things will get more and more firm. So it would be easier for the next projects to have such kind of trilateral trade between these three countries. So, thank you. I would also like to thank the organizers of this event for arranging such kind of thing, and also to you to give me an opportunity for explaining what happened to Karnali and how we plan to proceed ahead. Thank you.
Mr. Bharti, thank you very much. Let's give it up for all these people. These people are rock stars, and they told you today the business, and they shared with you the successes and the challenges. And one of the things I just want to mention before we get over to my colleague Malvika over here is that there's always a lot of discussion about successes. There's always a lot of discussion about big projects, about large opportunities, and about great ways to make this happen. What there's not always is a discussion about what the failures are, what we've tried and didn't work, what road we went down and had to turn around and go backwards and lose 2 or 5 years, or invest millions of dollars and then not make it out alive. Those are the discussions that really move this paradigm forward, and I think all of you have touched on some of those critical issues that have been challenges for you along the way, and you've shared with us what's in your heart. And for that, we're incredibly grateful, and we know that that's the kind of discussion that will move this whole paradigm forward. And I encourage all of you during these next couple days to really think about that. And I tell the people that I work with this quite often. Let's not get on stage, let's not talk in groups, let's not discuss with our peers and colleagues what we're doing and how great it is. Let's talk with them about what we tried and we messed up on, what didn't work, what seemed to be a good road when we thought about it, and then all of a sudden, it didn't happen because something bad happened. This is a volatile industry. This is a commodity that has parameters like none other in the world. We're talking about the volatility of geographies. We're talking about the volatility of unreliable energy sources. We're talking about the unknowability of the marketplace in a single commodity. We're talking about elasticities that are negative. We're talking about a lot of things in here in the energy markets that are not always accounted for when people are investing in projects. Unforeseeables, incredible risk takers. I read a book recently, and one of the key messages in the book was the very first people to travel around the world and meet other people from other countries or other nations, other localities before there were nations, they weren't priests or missionaries. They weren't politicians or diplomats. They weren't even really adventurers. The first people to travel from point A to point B, who went on camels, who climbed high mountains, who crossed big oceans and deserts, they were innovators. They were commercial agents. They were people who decided that I know something and I do something and I want to share it with other people because I can make their life better. And perhaps those people over there, they also know something and they do something and they make something that can perhaps make me and life for my family and my community better. And these people are innovators. They are traveling far and wide. They are sharing their voices with people around the world because they know that what they have could benefit others. And they're hoping that what others have could benefit them, because that's what trade and commerce is all about. Those are the true people that travel around the world and make the globe a better place. Thank you, all of you guys. I am going to turn it over to Malvika. Have everybody given a hand to Malvika? Because she's doing a stellar job.
Thank you very much for that.
Malvika, she has a one of those little app things, you know, where there's like a survey, you got to vote. So get out your phones or your tablets. Come on, get them out. All right, everybody got them out? Go for it.
Thank you very much for moderating the session wonderfully, Mr. Michael. Just to add on, we have one more further question for the app, which is what is the main factor which enables Southeast Asia power integration? The options are climate change, pricing of power, political harmony, proper law. Now, while you get on your phones and you vote for the question of the day, we will be showing the results in a short while. I would also regret to inform the panel that we will not be able to take any further questions. So in this regard, we are done with this session for now. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Now, moving forward, I'd like to request Sandeep Shah, the past president of IPAN, to present mementos to our guests on the stage. Thank you, sir. Can we have the token of appreciations on stage, please? I'd also like to request our delegates, the participants and the audience members to please vote for the question in the meantime. It's actually on the other side, sir. Okay, we'll take a quick photo. A quick photo. Right after this, we'll be starting with our third session directly We're supposed to also finish the third session at 4:40 p.m. because, as you know, we have 2 more sessions left. The last session is supposed to finish by 6 p.m. All right, one more time, I'd like to request Mr. Sandeep Shah to present mementos to our speakers on stage. Mr. Pankaj Batra, the Director, Integrated Research and Action for Development. To our moderator, Mr. Michael Satin, Director, Clean Energy, USAID. To Mr. Wilhelm Soderstrom, the Principal Consultant, Nordpool Consulting. Harish Saran, Executive Director, PTC India Limited. And to Mr. MD Mahbubur Rahman, Chief Engineer, Bangladesh Power Development Board. To Mr. S.N. Barde, Chief Executive Officer, GMR Energy. To Mr. Rajesh Kumar Mediratha, Director, Indian Energy Exchange, and Honorable Mr. Krishna Prasad Oli, Member, National Planning Commission. Thank you so much to our gentlemen on the stage. We have one more left. Are the results ready? Can we have it on screen, please? So there you go. For the question, what is the main factor which enables Southeast Asia power market integration? And the highest answer has been to political harmony, and this next one is for proper law.